Welcome to Feng Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Sherley, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. Welcome back to another episode of Story Time for Feng Podcast. And today we do have a special guest with us. We have Krystal, who is a Feng Shui designer and clutter expert who helps work from home entrepreneurs declutter and design a workspace that empowers them to create the life and business they want. Krystal, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am wonderful, Shirley. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. So I'm going to pass you the mic again so you can add on to your introduction and let the listeners know more about who you are and what you do.
Certainly. Like you said, I'm a Feng Shui designer and a clutter expert. So I work with work-from-home entrepreneurs to help them really declutter and design their workspace in such a way that empowers them to really create the life and business that they want.
Wonderful. So we're going to hear more about that later on in the show. So now you're going to start with your story and share with us what story you're going to be sharing with us today.
Sure. I feel like I've kind of always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Actually, that was sort of always my thing. And even since I was a little girl, my grandparents owned their own business and I kind of grew up in their shop. And I tried numerous businesses over the years, right? Trying to find, I guess, my sole purpose, right? What am I really here to do and bring to the world? And eventually I found my way into the business that I am in now. I went through quite a few of them along the journey to get here, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to break you to pieces a little more. So let's reel back. We'll start with your childhood. Give us a little bit of your childhood, how that was like. Where were you raised? Parents? How was the home life?
Well, I grew up in a really abusive home, actually. My parents divorced when I was about 8. They both remarried when I was roughly 9. Very, very shortly, actually. My mother, who is a narcissist and a sociopath, she actually married a pedophile, a very violently abusive alcoholic pedophile. And my father married, I guess I would call her a witch. She was the most wonderful woman on earth. She taught me everything I ever needed to know about being a woman, being anything and everything that I could have wanted to know. My biological mother really couldn't be bothered, right, with any of that stuff. So my stepmom was wonderful, and she taught me the beginnings of energy work, right? Magic, manifesting, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, right? She was the person who taught me that, which at the time was extremely important for me because I was in such an abusive situation. I told my mother exactly what it was that she was dating before she married him, and she actually called me a liar. She covered up all of the evidence. She took me to a therapist, told him the problem is I'm a liar and I won't stop lying about being abused. So of course, every time I would try to tell the therapist about the abuse, he would come at me with lying and literally until I just stopped talking altogether, and wouldn't really talk about it anymore. I didn't talk about it for years. Actually, the worst thing I would say is my parents are not very good people. I just never really talked about it all that much. But it was a very long sort of healing journey. I left their house as soon as possible, right? Even before I turned 18, I actually moved out the day after I graduated from high school. and went into my own place. I was pregnant with my first child, moved in, and started my own life, and really kind of, I guess you could say I was probably starting my healing journey then, although I didn't necessarily know even how to find the yellow brick road, let alone how to get on it and get all the way to, the Emerald City of healing. But I was getting there. I went from one abusive relationship after another, even in my adult, romantic relationships, up until I was really in about my 30s. And that is truly when my healing journey began. I went from being the abused victim almost to more of being the abuser. I'm not tolerating anything from you. And I wasn't happy with me at all. I was nothing in my life is what I ever envisioned it would be, right? I had this dream of wanting to have my own business, of wanting to make a difference in the world, of just wanting so much more. And none of it was ever really coming into fruition, right? Dream and dream and dream and work and work and work, but just always falling short, right? And there was a lot of stuff in there around just not believing in myself, really, not really ever having those thoughts that it would happen. I tried, like I had mentioned, I tried starting several businesses. The first couple that I started were actually multi-level marketing companies, right? Network marketing sort of companies. The second one, I was super fortunate. It was the owner of that particular company, the man that had started that one. He really, really believed in training, right? All the downlines led to him. So he was like, I'm going to train everybody, which was great because that was my first introduction to what we'll call personal development, right? Because he had all sorts of training seminars, not just on sales and how to build a team and how to create this sort of, thing that how network marketing works, but also he had some high level trainings that were personal development, that were all about doing the internal work. And so I got introduced to that at a fairly young age, right? I had left my I would say my last abusive relationship where I was the victim, right? And I had found this, and I was more of I'm taking charge of my life, and I'm not. And so it was a good place for me to start that part of my journey. And then that didn't work out. That business, I didn't heal me enough to make that business a success, but I healed me enough to move on to what was next.
Gotcha. Okay. So before we get into the business part, so at 8 years old, your parents divorced. Would you say things were pretty okay when the two of them were together?
I don't have a lot of memories of when my parents were together, to be honest. I have a few, high points and low points. I don't really ever think they were happy together, to be quite honest. My mother was 16 when she got pregnant with me. They weren't a love match, right? That was the beginning of the problem, right? My mother was the victim, right? Of getting pregnant with me. And so it was my fault that she got pregnant, right? With me. So it was always a blame game with her. She blamed my father, she blamed me. When they got divorced, I don't remember a happy marriage. I don't really remember a lot of happy childhood stuff, but I do remember after they got divorced, anytime there was any sort of visitation, right, exchanges, it was always me that had to be the negotiator, right? I would be the one on the phone while they screamed and called each other names and had to do this. So it was definitely not a love match. It was more of I hate to use that term, the trap a man. I was the trap a man baby. And let's call it the nice way. Trap a man. I was a trap a man baby. Were they in love? No.
Okay.
She just
Are you the
wanted
only
to.
child?
No, no,
Okay,
I was
so
the
there's
trap a
more after
man.
you.
Oh
You
yeah,
were the first trap a man baby.
yep.
Gotcha.
The second one
Okay.
was my mom's favorite victim, and then the third one was the save the marriage baby.
Got
And
it.
then she got divorced and got remarried, and then there was the baby from the new husband plus a bunch of stepkids, and yeah, so I had a
Your mom
mixer.
would have a story to tell about her life.
Oh,
So,
my mom would tell you all. She's a complete narcissist. She would tell you all sorts of, and a
she would
absolute
definitely
victim.
have a story to share. So she remarried when you were 9 years old. And from what you're telling me, it seems like primarily you lived with mom majority of the time and you went to dad to visit. Like, was it a weekend visitation with dad?
The first maybe couple years, maybe it was only a year. It wasn't a long time. It was like weekends. And then my dad moved across the country. And
Oh,
so then it became only summer visits. And so
only
so
summer.
that kind of sucked. Yeah, because it would be like we would leave Memorial weekend to go. And then we would always have to be back. My birthday is July 31st. And so we would always have to be back by August 1st.
I
So we would
see.
spend my birthday driving across the country every year to go from happiness to hell on earth. So my birthday was never a happy occasion after that happened because it was always spent in this miserable, like I'm going back to hell
Got it.
sort of condition.
I get you. Now, you said you knew this man was a pedophile before your mom even married him when you were dating. How did you know this at 9, Crystal?
Well, I didn't know the word pedophile, but I knew what he was doing.
He was doing to you or others?
Both. He was doing it to me. He was doing it to my sister. He was, I mean, like he would do stuff to all of the kids in my family. Like it wasn't just, and it wasn't all of touching. Some of it's just visual. Like you have to be standing here naked. Like I can't count how many times he made my brother come to the dinner table naked in front of all of the girls because it was some sort of religious punishment of humiliation around. Yeah, they had a lot of really weird stuff my parents did. But yeah, I was the one that told her before she married him, like, he's a bad person. Like, I actually gave her an ultimatum. I was like, it's him or me. And she married him. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't until I was a lot older. I mean, she was dating 3 men at the time. One of them was a cocaine addict. One of them was a gambler, and the third was a pedophile. But he made a lot of money. And so marrying the pedophile was the best for her, and the only thing she had to sacrifice was her daughters. Whereas if she had married one of the other two, she would have had to sacrifice her own well-being monetarily. So that's sort of that sums up my childhood kind of in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, that does sum it up. How long? So, what you're telling me, one of the things he did, so he sexually abused both you and your sister.
Yeah, and
And he would,
all more than one of my sisters. My youngest sister, even his own daughter, I saw him abusing her on multiple occasions. I witnessed it personally, even from the time she was a tiny baby.
okay. And this was happening in the home that you girls were living in.
Yeah.
Okay. How long from, I would say, I'm going to say 9 years old till literally when you left at about 17, 18, this lasted?
It was always until I moved
Did
out.
you end up losing your virginity to this man because of the
No.
sexual abuse? Okay.
No,
So he
no.
never took it that far. Okay.
No, just a lot of other very
Touch and
inappropriate
visual.
touches and a lot of visual stuff. But no, he did rape my sister. I don't believe
middle
that
one,
she was
not the younger
of-
one.
Yeah. Oh no, he touched her too. I've definitely seen him
Okay.
touch more than one. But
How
yeah,
old were
there's
you when you first told your mother? Because you did make your mother aware that, at 9 years old, the best that you knew how this man is a bad man. And when you got older,
Yeah.
we're talking about, 14, 15, 16, you know now legitimately what he's doing is wrong. Is that when you reapproach mom again and mom just kind of like, girl, please remove yourself? Was that basically the situation?
It really never stopped. Like I said, they took me to this therapist and he wouldn't listen. Nobody would listen. It just got to the point where it was just like, it was just a constant fight. Like there was no more, I'm not going to call you what you are. I'm just going to say, F off. Like at 14, I was like, I'm grown. You can't tell me nothing. Like, unless you're going to punch me and knock me out, there is nothing that you can say to me that's going to change the way I think about you. And it was like that because it started so young, and I think because I was the oldest, and because I'd learned already from such a young age, like defending my younger sister, right, from the abuses of my mom, even before the divorce happened, right? I, always was the one defending my younger sisters. So I was always that fighter, right? I was always the fighter. So as I got older, I was very fortunate. I got to go live with my father for a few years that were very, important years. So I had a break that I didn't live with them. When I moved back, right, I was 15 when I moved back in with my mother and her husband. And so at that point, it was more like, touch me and I will cut it off. Like, I don't care what body part it is, I will hurt you. If you come touch me with your hand and you will pull back a nub. Like, I was at that stage.
Got it. Okay. Did you
tell by the time I got to be a teenager? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I told my father, and we had a big custody battle when I was 9. And we were assigned, a guardian ad litem and people from the courts. And we were assigned all those people. And my mother managed to convince all of them that I was lying. And, of course, that my sister was lying as well because she was only repeating what I was saying. So it didn't even matter that it wasn't just, she invalidated all of it and covered up all sorts of evidence. Just evidence of everything. He was an alcoholic. He liked to drink and drive. We had car accidents where he just got drunk and drove into a tree. And her first response would be, go hide the beer in the woods. And then get him out of the driver's seat and into the passenger seat so that she could get in the driver's seat and, never worried about if the kids were okay. That was last on her list of priorities. So, yeah, it was
trying times. Definitely trying times. I can totally understand why it all started from the childhood. So now at 15, you came back home. And I guess that's when the summers, from 15, 16, 17, the summer started with your dad until...
No, it was pregnant. Over. I didn't get to go back again. I never got to go back. The summers with my dad lasted from the time I was 9 until 13. That was it. And then I lived with him.
I see.
And then when I moved back, I lived with him,
have to come back?
Well, my mom never gave up custody during the time that I lived with my father. Okay. So essentially, my father and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of things, right? I was coming into my own as far as I felt, right? As a young woman and expressing my opinions about stuff. And he had his own issues, right? My father was incredibly racist and quite misogynistic. He wanted me to be a son. He only had daughters. He really only wanted sons. And, he didn't think much of us, really. And so... And I'd grown up in this very fight house. So, my father and I would clash a lot over things at that age and just our viewpoints on things. And so my mother pulled rank basically and said, you're moving back. And I ran away from home. I had been living on the streets for a few months at that point, and she was like, come back home. I actually only agreed to come back home on the condition that they put me in a foster home.
Because you knew what you were coming back home to.
I knew what I was going back into, but I also knew I couldn't just keep fighting with my father all the time. Like, I loved my father so much, but we just couldn't get past some of these things. And of course, he didn't, there was just conflict. So I was like, I'll come back, but only if I go into a foster home. I won't live with you, and I won't live with your husband. Like, and so, I ended up moving back in with them. And as soon as it was mentioned, anytime after that, like, I just would literally got punched in the face by a grown man who would like beat me into the ground anytime I mentioned it. So we kind of didn't talk about foster care for very long. And I just was like, I got 2 years until I'm out. Come near me. And that was really where I came to that point. Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And you're a mother. I'm a mother.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And at the ages that you're telling me, between 9, we're going to say at 8, because that's when they got the divorce. From 8 to 17. Yeah. That's like the changing phases where you know how every 7 years a person is evolving. You have from 1 to 7, then you have 7 to 14, then you have 14 to 21. That stage, you're like finding yourself. You're going from 8 years old, right around the corner from womanhood. Now you've entered into womanhood. You're a teenager trying to find your identity. And here you are fighting an abuser, fighting, like, you are emotionally disconnected from your parents because they're literally in their own world. You've all, from 8 years old and on, that's when we're going to start. You've been trying to like fight a fight all by yourself, all by your lonely. It's like you're in war all alone and no one's on your side. The therapist wasn't on your side. Your mom called you a liar. Your dad was in his own world. I know you said when you first started sharing your story, the stepmom was a witch, so she must have had good days and bad days.
No, she was a witch in the healer sense of the word, the literal sense of the word. I don't mean like wicked stepmother. No, I mean the literal sense of the word. She was a healer. She was a wise woman. She was a magician. She taught me everything about being a woman. The primary steps. She taught me about periods. She taught me about sex. She taught me about boys. She taught me about cooking. She taught me about parenthood. She taught me about like literally everything. But she was also very much an occult practitioner. She read palms. She practiced astrology. She practiced magic, manifestation, energy work. She did all of those things. I see. I think if it had not been for her, I would not be who I am.
Got it. You get emotional.
She died when I was 15.
Oh, right. The same year you left Dad, she passed away?
She died a few months later. Yeah.
You didn't even get to say your goodbyes.
No, I was not allowed to go to the funeral at all. When I had run away from home, she had been sick for a long time, but was terrified of the doctor and wouldn't go, and was just sort of self-remedying it. And I had run away from home. I was gone for months. And then my mother came and took me back across the country. And it was shortly after that when I called and spoke to them for the first time. And it was strange because I remember calling, and this very mechanical voice picked up the phone. And I didn't even know what it was. I hung up. I was so afraid. I was like, I think aliens are there. Like, I literally told my sister, I think aliens have Dad. Like, it's a robot voice. And I think I called 3 times and hung up every time before I finally called, and I said something to the robot voice. And I'm sorry, I've never told this story before. It was her. She had had throat cancer, and they'd had to remove her voice box. And so she was talking with one of those things. And, she died within a few months, and I never got to go. My mom wouldn't let me go to the funeral. She was so jealous of my relationship with my stepmom because I adored her so much that I wasn't allowed to go. So, my goodbyes have all been after the fact.
Gotcha. Now, of course, she was the most special figure, the most important thing in your life at that time, with all the tumultuous stuff that was going on between stepdad, mom, and dad, which was, we're going to say, the healthiest of the other two. The
Yeah.
healthiest of the other two.
Mm-hmm.
How were you able to get over that? At 15, you find out the one person that was important to you through all the stuff that you were going through. Now you're living with your mom and you're like, 2 more years. I got 2 more years and then I could be out of here. How were you able to get past that when you're not able to say goodbye? I can relate because my grandma passed away from breast cancer. She raised me for the first almost 5 years of my life. She's who I identify as mom. I do have a connection with my mother, but my mother left when I was 6 months old. So I know what it feels like to not truly be able to give your goodbyes to someone that is very special to you. It took me years to be able to heal from it. Even now to this day, out of the blue, I'll see, like, her birthday's in September. So September, I get very emotional. Couldn't even really tell you why. Sometimes I'll think about her. I'll get emotional and I feel at times she's in the room. How were you able to get past that?
I don't know that I ever did. I still talk to her. My daughter is named after her.
Oh.
Yeah, her birthday is actually coming up in a few weeks. As a matter of fact, my daughter will be here for the date that is her birthday. I actually didn't even think about that until just now when we were having that. When you were saying that about the birthday thing, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I didn't. I never had anyone to talk to. My parents were experts at divide and conquer, right? There was so many kids in the family, they could not ever risk us understanding that there was more of us than them. And so they made sure to turn us all into enemies of each other, right? We were trained to police one another and regulate and tattle and, you know, all of that. So I didn't have really close relationships with any of my siblings. My one sister and I are incredibly close now. And we do talk about it. And we actually talk about her and she'll say the same thing. Like, I remember going to school and like my mom just died and everybody's like, what are you talking about? Like, your mom is right there. Like, and nobody could understand what we were like, what was happening. Like, I completely like disassociated and just shut down. And I was like, I never really felt like I was a part of things. Right. It was about 2 years later, right? When I turned 18, my daughter was born. I did move back out there with my father, and helped. He still had all of her stuff.
Oh.
And so I was able to help him actually declutter.
Okay.
And go through all of her things. That was actually really cathartic for me. I went through all of her things and kept what I wanted and released all of the rest. Helped my father to release all of the rest. And not so much emotionally, but at least her physical items so that he could move forward with his life too. That helped, I think. That was a big step for me, being able to go through that part. But I don't, it's one of those things. I don't know that there is recovery. Like, your parent died. You know what I mean? It's no different than you know what I mean? Like, your biological parents. My father died a couple of years ago, and it was the same, right? Yeah. The same feelings.
Exactly. So at 18, this is a great segue into what I wanted to ask. At 18, now you've left your mom, you have your daughter, you move back in with your dad. How does that relationship evolve? Like he still had her stuff there. So this is great because this is where the declutter starts that speaks of what you're doing now. How is that relationship with your father now that you're 18 with a child?
Well, he was still him. He was still super judgy of everything. It didn't really, like even my daughter was still a daughter and she was still not good enough, but he was also going through his, and at the same time, when I moved in with him, now keep in mind, my father also has heart problems. So at the same time that my stepmother was dying and going through all of her hospitalizations and her surgeries, my father was at the same time also in the hospital having heart surgery. He had bypass surgery twice. I think he had a double bypass and a quadruple bypass. So when I moved out there and I was living with him and I was in the process of decluttering, he actually woke me up one morning to say, hey, don't freak out, but the ambulance is going to be here in just a couple minutes. I'm having a heart attack and they're about to take me to the hospital.
I am having a heart attack. Just like that.
That's, hey, baby, I need you to wake up a minute. Krystal, wake up. Yeah. So don't panic. Like literally, that's what he said to me. I need you to not freak out, but the ambulance is going to be here in a minute and I'm having a heart attack. So I am 18 years old and the father and I have just split up. He moved out there with us. We all three moved out there together. He up and left, was like, can't do it. I'm going back home. And so now it's just the baby's father. Yep.
Got it.
So now me and the baby are here with my dad. My dad now has a heart attack and is in the hospital. I'm on the bus with my baby going back and forth to the hospital to like see my father, right? And help him come back home, declutter his house of all my stepmother's things, right? Like it was not, and I've got my baby's father, who we're not really split up at this point. He's now back across the country. I'm in Colorado, he's in Minnesota, and he's calling me up with, she needs her father. We need to be back together. You need to come back here. So yeah, it was just kind of a hot mess, really.
Oh my gosh. So how long did you stay with dad? You decluttered, you went back there. Why did you choose to go back there? Is it just so you could have gotten away from your mom and that was the first thing that came to mind?
No. I just always felt more at home. Colorado felt more like home to me than Minnesota, partly. Partly, yes, it was definitely to get away from, far, far away from them. But also to get back to the one place that I had ever felt happy.
Got it.
Right? When I lived there and I went to high school, I had friends, I had a life, I had like social life, I could go do stuff. Life was free and happy. And so I think I really just wanted to get back to that. And even though my dad and I didn't always get along, and he didn't always appreciate the fact that I was a daughter, he was a loving father. He was very adamant that childhood was meant to be for children, right? Like when we would come to visit, it was playtime and enjoy life time, not spend all day working, cleaning the house, gardening, taking care of your parents sort of life. And so it was, to me, living with my dad had always been a joyful experience, even when we were butting heads over the boys I was dating, right? Like in high school.
I guess that's normal for a dad to be upset. Your little girl is now dating.
Right. And I was dating interracially. So that was a real problem. I was dating black men in high school. Yes.
Oh, that's why you say your father was a racist.
He was incredibly racist.
So
but my mom's family is incredibly racist too. My mom's family won't even acknowledge that my mom is biracial, right? Like they won't.
Your mom is black and white?
No, my mom is Native American.
Ah.
But nobody in my family will acknowledge that
That she's Native American.
right, all four of my
Which
grandmother's
side?
oldest
Her mom
children.
or her dad's side?
Her dad is Native.
Got it. So, so that's why your dad was very upset. On top of the fact he is now being strict because he doesn't want his daughter to date.
Mm.
He's also upset that you're dating black men.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my. And that really was the start of it, of why you ran away from home.
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of, stuff that was going on because I was in high school and all my friends were black. And so I spoke, I could remember him even saying, if I close my eyes and listen to you talk, you sound like you're black. And I'm like, what do black people sound like, Dad? Like, what does that mean? What do black people sound like? Because
Your
I
parents
spoke
are what,
Ebonics.
The 50s, right? 50s? How old are you?
I'm 50.
You're 50. So
My parents
I was
were
born
born
in 83. I'm 39, 82. So you were born in 72.
I was born in 71.
71.
My parents were born, Yep, my father died a few years ago in his 70s. I know
So
my
they were
father's
60s.
24 years older than me.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
my
we're
dad was
saying
24
50,
when I
60.
was born. My mom was 16.
So yeah.
So, and they grew up
Racism
in,
was still around at that time.
and they grew up in the Midwest. They grew up, my father grew up on a farm in Iowa. Like there were no black people in that area.
Yep.
Even the first black person I saw in where I grew up was like, he was adopted by white people and grew up in the town next over. Like I just didn't, like, it just wasn't a thing that my dad grew up with. And then he was living in Denver. There's a lot of black people. And, for the most part, it wasn't a thing. And that's what I couldn't understand. I would be like, why is it okay for you to be friends with black people and not okay for me to date black people? What is the problem? Like, I just couldn't understand it. And he could never explain it. And, I was a very independent, opinionated young lady and very adamant that, look, I've been tolerating this for my whole life. I'll be damned if you're going to tell me what I can do. Like, you've never done anything. Like,
That's one thing I have to say. I'm not surprised that you stood up, because there's always a child out of all the siblings that is not fearful in standing up and voicing themselves when they are hearing things and it just doesn't sound right to their ears, and they'll challenge anyone. And that's okay. I was that child where I was always challenging my parents, questioning things, or just seen as rebellious when I wasn't being rebellious. It was just, you can't provide me with an explanation.
right. I started doing it when I was 5. My mother is what I would call a Bible thumper. Like, she is super religious. We would read the Bible every day, and we would have to go to church every Sunday. But I would read in the Bible where, it's like, God says you're supposed to talk to him privately in a closet. And only people that go to church are showing out. Like, they're there to show out. That's not it. And so when I would say, like, why do we have to go to church? God says talk to him privately. What is this all about? She did not like being called a hypocrite by a 5-year-old. Let's just say that much, because I'm like, you're not saying what's true. You're trying to tell me I should listen to what this book says, but you're not following it. And I was always that child who was challenging it. Yeah. And so, and I didn't think twice about challenging it when it came up.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Voicing yourself is a good thing. It started for you at a young age, and it actually was a benefit for you when you had to move back home to your mother and you had to face your abuser.
Yeah.
And you had to tell him no.
Yeah, because all the time it was like a daily, and it wasn't just it was a daily, like a fist fight kind of thing every single day of, nope, I don't have to put up with you.
Exactly.
And I don't, I don't care what you say. And I'm still that person where I'm just like, I don't tolerate the abusers. I'm not going to go sit at your Thanksgiving table with your your pet pedophile. Sorry, not
And
me.
what you don't realize is at that young age, you were just setting some boundaries. You didn't know what you were doing, of course, but you were just setting boundaries at a young age. And it would just take a few more years for you to learn what was happening, why you were happening, and the healthy ways that you need to go about things. But so now your father goes to the hospital. He's having his heart attack. You're going back and forth with your daughter. So we're going to fast forward a few years now. Did you stay in Colorado? Let's fast forward to take us to maybe 5 or 10 years from now. How is life going?
Well, in that immediate interim, I ended up moving back. I got married. I had a second child. We got divorced. I wound up and then I was actually about to head back to Colorado, wound up in another abusive relationship, stayed for another few years before I finally was able to come. I moved back out to Colorado. It took me a while, but mostly that's where my kids grew up from the time they were like 7-ish. I moved back out there. That's in fact when I found that second company, started and learned all the training. Like that was what happened as soon as I moved back. That was about, my kids were still in single digits, but like maybe 9 and 7-ish.
Okay.
Started that company. It kind of didn't work out for me. And I was just at a loss. Like, what do I really want to do with my life? And that's when I went back to school to become an interior designer and came across Feng Shui. And that really resonated with me because it's such an energetic study. It's all about the flow of energy. And so it really spoke to me. And I followed that just into my career.
Would you say your stepmom is one of the big reasons why you are in the industry that you are in? When it comes to Feng Shui, the decluttering starting when you had to declutter the things in your father's home, her possessions.
Yeah, I think it even started before that. I was never a super, attachment. I was always decluttering. It was sort of like my superpower. I'm just not going to hold, nothing meant anything to me, right? But when it did, right? But it was easy for me to declutter. It didn't, letting go of those things. Yeah, yes, that, but also the bigger part of, I think, how she is the one that led me into this path is because she is the one who introduced me to the concepts of magic, witchcraft, actual witchcraft, where I went and read books and studied for decades. I studied witchcraft, the history of it, the history of women, the history of oppression of women, the history of the rise of religion and how that has formatted to oppress women and people of color, right? Specifically all the Christian religions, right? Catholicism. It led me into studying all of that, which really led me to my purpose of empowering women. That is my mission, is to empower women like myself that are still stuck in that clutter, right? Because clutter is not just physical. It's physical, mental, and emotional. They are all wrapped up in each other. And so for me, I can hear what it's saying, what the physical clutter is saying, telling me what the mental and emotional clutter is that you're holding on to. But all of that, none of that would have happened if it weren't for my stepmother. Because I never would have studied I wouldn't have spent my whole life learning everything that it took for me to be able to help women the way I do now. Right? I wouldn't, I don't know where I ever would have learned about even empowering women, being so oppressed and so beat down, and having such a poor relationship with women, right? Even growing up, I didn't have a lot of women friends. Just, couldn't connect with them because of my relationship with my mother, right? But with my stepmother, I had this one thread to hold on to of my connection to women, which I think is what really brought me home to being able to serve women.
That's good. Now, tell the listeners exactly the basics of Feng Shui, because I know Feng Shui is in um, is in the Asian culture. I know simple things like red door, having a red door in your house, or how certain furniture should be faced. Is this along the lines of what we're talking about when we think of Feng Shui?
Some of it, yes.
Okay.
Feng Shui is really about the study of the flow of energy in your space. Very
Gotcha. That's
simply.
what it boils down to. So,
It,
exactly, that's why it's important that things need to be faced a certain way because of the
yeah.
flow of energy. So, energy is not being blocked, correct? Certain directions,
Yes.
east, west, south, and north. And you have to know this is why I've heard too. Your back should never be facing the front door when someone's walking into your home.
That's,
Things like that.
yeah, that is more energetic. It is feng shui because it's about the sha and it has to do with the energy, but some of it is, a lot of the books and stuff that's out there is fake feng shui. It's not real feng shui. The principles are there, but the actual mathematics and all of the stuff that makes it accurate is what's missing. So some of what you have talked about is not the real stuff, and some of it is. But it has to do with the flow of energy and how we remedy that so that it flows smoothly like a river, because it has to do with the spark of life, the energy in you, the energy of life that is chi, right? And so you are connected to that flow. It's literally your flow. And so when we work with feng shui, we are remedying where it's out of alignment. And so, yes, turning your back is a thing because energetically it'll make you feel yuck, but it doesn't always mean that that is the proper positioning from a feng shui standpoint. Sometimes from the mathematics, you actually do need to have your back to the door because the door is in the wrong place. But your power position positions you so that the door is here. Then we have to come up with an actual solution to solve the problem, because you need to be placed this way because energetically it's what amplifies you. But having the door behind you makes you feel vulnerable, and so it creates this negative energy inside of your body.
Got it.
And so there are points to it that are yes, and then there are nuances that are very fine that come involved in play in that.
Thank you for breaking that down. So and you kept saying mathematics. So there is some math involved in this feng shui.
It's all math. It is all math. Yep, it's all math.
Very interesting to hear, because I didn't know that at all. So I thought it was just simply, but I haven't done any real study. So that's, of course, where my ignorance come from. I thought it was just the direction of furniture and even certain colors in the home.
And it is, because all of that is how we remedy the flow, right? We have to do the math calculations because it's like science, right? It's a science, but there's a lot of math involved in science, right? If you look at biology or chemistry or any of them, there's a whole lot of math involved in science. And so it's really more of a science than anything, right? So there is a science to it, which means there's specific mathematic calculations that you have to follow. And when you get this answer, this is the solution. And when you get this answer, that's the solution. And so the solutions look like there's 5 remedies, right? They're the elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And so it might be colors, right? It might be colors, right? It might be green and brown if you need a wood remedy. It might be gold, silver, white, or gray if you need a metal energy, right? Remedy, excuse me. It might be blue or black if it's a water remedy, right? So yes, colors can represent energy, but there's a whole lot of nuance to it that's really involved with how to do it, like how to actually do the thing. That's the part where it gets scientific and mathematical.
Yeah. Very mathematical. You got to love those numbers dealing with Feng Shui, obviously. I want to talk to you about declutter because you mentioned something that is very important. And decluttering, what did you say? Decluttering is also emotional. I think that's what you said.
Clutter is not just physical. Clutter is mental, emotional, and physical.
Yes, because when I watch hoarders, and my mom is a bit of a hoarder.
Yes.
I am far from a hoarder. Never was. I was always cleaning the house and throwing things out. Still to this day, I am. I don't have attachments to things, and I'm happy I don't because I realize when you live as a hoarder, it is mental.
It is.
It is mental. And that's why hoarders are able to live like this comfortably, and it's okay. And normally it is a traumatic situation. But when you are decluttering someone's home, what is the first thing that you do that I want you to let our listeners that is important when it comes to decluttering? So I guess what is a word of advice you want to offer? Because I like my home. When you walk in my home, I like it to feel homey. I like it to feel clean. I will keep certain documentations. Certain documentations I keep longer, but I throw shit in the trash.
Good.
Krystal.
Good.
I throw things away.
Good.
I decluttered my wardrobe. Now it's color specific. I only have certain colors in my wardrobe. This being one of them. I have certain patterns. So I have one rack with the jeans, one rack with the tops, and one rack with the dresses and every year, if I had not worn it in a year, that means I don't need the shit.
That's right. That's right.
That means I don't need it. So what is a piece of advice you want to offer to people when it comes to decluttering? That's hard for some people, girl. You don't let that shit go.
It is. And that's okay. And so there, I could say so much about it. We could be here for hours talking about this. So there are so many reasons why people won't let go. And they can't. It's not just that they won't, they literally can't. Because, all of this about Feng Shui, right? It all has to do with your space and your environment. Because your home, the space that you inhabit, is a reflection of you. It's a reflection of not just your personality, it's a reflection of everything that you have been taught to believe since the day that you were born. Everything that you believe about what is possible, what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, all of it. So clutter, right? If everything we own is a reflection of what we believe, clutter is a reflection of all of the stuff that keeps us limited and stuck. Mostly it's around, most of my clients, I will say it's around like worthiness, scarcity, and obligation is what that clutter tends to look like. And so they really, because they try to go, there's literally 5 steps that you have to go through in order to declutter. Most people try to go from step 1 to step 5. And they skip over all of the magic that happens in steps 2, 3, and 4, which allows you to declutter not just the physical, but the mental and the emotional part that is keeping you stuck where you are. And so that's why so many of these decluttering methods, like the Marie Kondo thing, doesn't work. Because we're just skimming the surface, right? There's 2 sides to the clutter coin, is how I like to explain it. There's clutter, and there's everything else that's not clutter. And so if you're only focusing on everything that is not clutter, right? All the stuff that you love, you never are listening to the clutter and what it's telling you about why you are stuck and not achieving the life that you want. All of it is in there. All of the stuff that I've been talking about, all of my whole story, all of that was in my own clutter, right? And I was a master declutterer, and I still had clutter because clutter is not just trash. Clutter is way more than just trash. Not everything is clutter, but clutter and trash are not synonymous.
Okay.
Anything that you do not need, use, or love is clutter. Everything that is trash is trash. So when you have to go and declutter and you try to skip over the steps, you never get past the cycle, right? Of just repeating buy, get rid of. Buy. It's like gaining, losing 10 pounds, gaining back 20. It's the same. You're just going to keep buying the same type of clutter over and over and over again. You'll buy the same scarcity clutter, the same worthiness, and the same obligation clutter, and it'll just look different every time, but you'll never get to the heart of it. And you'll never actually declutter the emotional baggage that it is reflecting at you. And so instead, you're just going to sit here being reflected all of the shit show that you don't want, right? And so that's why it gets so hard to declutter, because you get really stuck in it energetically, right? Not just in your space, but in your physical body, right? Because your spark of life, your energy, the energy that animates your physicality is the same energy that is flowing through your space and through the rest of the world, right? You talk about your results in the world, the impact that you make. It starts with that spark of life that is the flow of energy in your body. And it goes from that to the flow that's in your space, right? Into all the Feng Shui corners that are reflecting your career, your relationships, your health, your creativity, your fame factor, your self-knowledge, all of these different boxes that you put your life in, right? All of the different areas. All of that is being impacted by this flow of energy. That's where it's flowing, right? And your home is a map for this flow. So if it's stuck in your house, it's also going to be stuck in your life. So if you're struggling with relationships, right? And you have clutter in your home that is stagnating up the area that is mirroring relationships, right? This is how it's reflected back to you. And now it affects the impact that you make because your clutter is stagnating the impact.
So now, based on what you're saying, it makes sense why after a traumatic event, someone may become a hoarder.
Yes.
Because they want to, let's just say after somebody is deceased, they want to hold on to that memory where the clutter becomes now emotional. They don't want to let that piece of paper that that person wrote on that has nothing to do with anything. It could have just been paid in full, the PSE&G bill.
Yes. Yes.
And they don't want to let it go.
But we also put yes. Because there's something there. And like paper is really hard to dive into. Paper is super easy to become clutter. It's essentially a wood energy, right? Paper is wood. Exactly. Even though it's a dead energy. When we're talking about Feng Shui and we're using remedies, wood needs to be living energy. So plants are the remedy that we would generally use. Wood furniture is dead wood furniture. So we don't generally consider that a wood remedy. The same is true with paper. So all like the PG&E bill or books or all of that stuff that is just paper, that is super heavy energy. Even though paper itself is really light, you think of wood, right? A log is heavy, right?
Exactly.
And so that energy is the energy that paper carries with it. So that even though it's not a lot, it stagnates the energy very quickly, which kind of allows paper to like breed on top of itself. Have you ever noticed that? Like if you have two pieces of paper laying on top of each other, and you come back 3 days later, now there's going to be 10 pieces of paper there. And if you don't do something about it and you come back later, the whole corner will be full of paper. It's just like, that is what happens. Like, it literally breeds upon itself because the energy gets stuck, and like attracts like. And so it energetically attracts the stuckness of this heavy weighted energy. So we have to be able to declutter it, but we have to go through all the steps. And the reason nobody wants to go through steps 3, 4, and 5 is because that's where you, or excuse me, 2, 3, and 4 is because that's where you really have to face that trauma.
Gotcha. So it's important. Now, what are the
excavate.
5 steps? I guess we do have a few minutes before we go into the top 3 pieces of advice you want to offer. Do we have time to go into the 5 steps?
We do, and I always like to offer this as a free gift to the audience. So do you mind if I just share? Because they can download it themselves.
No, and I think you did send me the link. So is it going? Did you send me the links? That way it'll be on the website.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I should have. So they can just download it themselves at declutteryourmindset.com, and it'll walk them through the 5 steps. And so it starts with discover, right? You have to discover your clutter, right? Okay. And then you have to get into like diagnosing the clutter. You have to really dive into it, so that you can disconnect that relationship and dissolve it. So that then when you donate, which is the 5th step, when you donate that clutter, which doesn't necessarily mean donate, right? You can get rid of it in any way that feels fitting to you, that donation motion, right? Then when you release it, it's a whole release. It's not just the release of the physical, it's the release of all of that pieces, right? Because we've already done the mental and emotional part, being able to do that.
I see it here. Declutter, diagnose, disconnect, dissolve, and donate. Wonderful. So the top 3. Number 1, clutter is real. And you're definitely right when you say it's emotional and mental, because you can immediately walk into somebody's home and get a quick visual of what's going on in their mind and their life if their house looks like complete shit. And I'm not talking about, a busy mom who maybe just has a coat on the couch. We all know what we're talking about when you've walked into somebody's home and you're like, my God. And you're just looking around. So
my favorite are always the ones that are spick and span or spick and clean, and they're always like, don't mind the mess. I'm like, I know what that is.
Yes,
I know what that is, honey.
Exactly.
I can help you. I can help you, because that is I'm apologizing for all of the shit show that I've got hidden in the closet that you can't see.
That's pretty much it. And I know I've done like, oh, the house is a mess, don't mind it. You throw something in the closet real quick.
But what you're really apologizing for is not the physical clutter. You're apologizing for the stuff that you think is wrong with you.
I believe it. I do, because at times and then I always think back to myself, what am I apologizing for? They're already in my home. Like,
right.
What am I apologizing for? Why am I saying sorry? And I've asked myself a few times, because I feel like women especially, we say sorry for anything and everything. It's a word we use so loosely. It's like half the time we don't even mean it because we say it so much.
Right.
So what is one piece of advice you want to offer from a Feng Shui or declutter perspective when someone needs to throw the shit away in their house? One step they should take.
Start with the paper.
Oh, that's good and simple. Start with the paper. So any mail that you're saving, start with that first.
Yeah.
If you have taxes from 10 years ago, why are you keeping it? The audit would have been done by now.
Yep. All the paper. Just do the paper. Like, that will make a world of difference. If you just go through every room in your house and just declutter the paper, your whole house will feel different.
Gotcha. Based off of your childhood, your adulthood, what is a piece of advice you want to offer to women out there that might be going through similar situations. A 17-year-old who's listening to this podcast who might be experiencing abuse in their home, don't know where to turn, what advice do you have to offer them?
You're not alone. And if you have nowhere else to turn, you can call me. If you have nobody else that will listen, I will listen, and I will believe you.
And that's huge. And I feel for you when you said, you went to the therapist and even the therapist thought you was a liar. And it's so sad. It just goes to show you, even with therapy, there are some great therapists out there. So I'm not knocking any one. But there are also some shitty therapists. And that's in any line of business you do. There are going to be some corrupt people.
Yeah.
And last thing is number 3. How have the negatives that you've gone through in your life made you the strong woman that you are today?
They didn't. They made me very weak and very angry and very broken. But all of the work that I did to heal all that damage, that is what made me strong and able to stand loud and proud and tell the truth.
You didn't allow anything to break you.
Oh.
You learned from everything that you've gone through, and also you were willing to do the work, implement certain tools to change your life, and you didn't use the negatives as a crutch.
Yeah. Some of them have been the biggest blessings because now I get to do what I do.
Exactly. You get to do what you do. You love what you do. And that's what's very important. That's what's very important when you're owning a business. As Krystal said, there are times where you may start one business, you fail. You start another business, you fail. You start a third business, you fail. And sometimes you just need to also sit back and ask yourself, why am I getting into all the things that I'm getting to and fail? What am I doing wrong? What am I not doing? Being an entrepreneur is hard. The word sounds beautiful, gorgeous, nice. It sounds like, oh shit, I'm going to be working for myself. But you work longer hours. It's hard starting up by yourself. You don't have all the money necessary at times when it comes to startup. Entrepreneurship is very hard. As Krystal said, she did a few things and they failed, but she never stopped staying focused. And now she's doing something she loves, which is absolutely, I think, even talking to you right now, it fits your energy. The energy that you are giving off here. And then when you were like, I decluttered for my father when I went back and I realized my stepmother's stuff was still there. Like you said, it started way back when. But that right there identified, like, you've loved this from a long time ago. And
From the time I was little.
Started a long time ago, but you dabbled into other things until you realized it. This is why it's also important to do something that you're passionate about and that you love. Because when the money does not start rolling in it first, that's okay, because you will still persevere. So we're going to end today. As Krystal has said, there are 5 steps that is important. She does offer the free gift on her website that is going to be available on the website when the episode does post for the audience. And the top 5 are declutter, diagnose, disconnect, dissolve, and donate. And when you go to the site, you can definitely look into it a little more, and she dives into each 5. So the top 3 things that she had to provide was how to declutter your home first. For those of you who might be hoarders at home and you're looking at your house and you need to do something, start with the paper. Krystal said don't jump from 1 to 5. Just start with the paper, because that is going to be a huge load lifted. Paper is light, but wood is very heavy. If you are going through any traumatic situation out there, regardless if it's abuse, regardless if you feel alone and you just don't have anybody to turn to, you're not alone. And push comes to shove, if anything, call Krystal, because she will definitely be there to at least be an ear to listen to. Because many times that's what we need. We need comfort. We need to get away from the terrible situation that we're in. And lastly, how was she able to persevere? It's through all the tools and all the healing that she went through. Being a traumatic situation is hard. We all go through different shit. We all have different situations. Rather, it's a death in your it's a death in your family, infidelity, abuse, financial. We can name several, but it's getting up when you fall and realizing that, as she said, you're not alone. We're all out here going through something. Life is hard at times, but it's a matter of being focused, regardless what the situation is that you're encountering. Krystal, I want to thank you for being a guest today. You provided us with great piece of information. Even me, myself, you gave me a little education on Feng Shui, because I didn't realize there were so many numbers involved. All I assumed with my little ignorant self was the direction of furniture and colors, and that's all it was. But no, there is a lot more to Feng Shui than that. Declutter, as she says, is emotional and mental. So we want to thank you for being a guest. Thank you for providing us with the information that you did. And remember, listeners, I always thank you for tuning in. And remember to love yourself, voice yourself, and be yourself. To the next episode, guys. Have a great one. Thanks for tuning in to Fun Palais Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.